Pottenger's Cats. Small book, less than 100 pages. Pottenger's Cats, A Study in Nutrition. I love this book, so we're going to talk about this book. This video is going to be titled Raw Feeding versus Almost Every Health Problem That Cats Have. And it's the same today as it was when this book was written in the 30s and 40s, or when Pottenger was doing his cat studies in the 1930s and 40s, so 80 years ago. So between 1932 and 1942, Dr. Francis Pottenger was working at a sanatorium medical facility in California, and he was using cats to try to perfect an adrenal extract. So back in the 1930s, this was not long after modern medicine had kind of realized that people get adrenal burnout, adrenal fatigue, and a lot of sick people need adrenal gland help. So Dr. Pottenger was trying to figure out how to make the right adrenal supplement, and he was testing it on cats. Now, you may not like that, but this was the 1930s, this is the way it was done, and he took way better care of his cats than any modern laboratory would do, so it's okay. So the basic story is, over this 10-year period, he started out, he was feeding his cats raw milk, cod liver oil, and cooked meats, including organs, because cats would eat the organs, they're carnivores. And this was coming from the local, the hospital he worked at, basically. But too many of his cats were dying under anesthesia. He had put them under anesthesia to do things to their adrenal glands, and they were dying and they weren't healthy. And he was running out of cats. So he started getting more and more cats coming in from the neighbors or stray cats or community or whatever. But he didn't have enough food for all these cats. He didn't have enough leftover cooked scraps from the hospital. So he had to start getting scraps of meat from the local butcher shop or local meat packing plant. Within a few months, he realized that the cats that were fed the raw meat that hadn't been cooked were just way healthier than the other ones, and they could handle the anesthesia just fine and recover. So this was just a chance observation in a medical doctor and scientist 80 or 90 years ago, and it piqued his interest, his curiosity. So the famous Pottenger cat study began. And it's unique because it's so thorough, and just how far Dr. Pottenger took it to prove not only the importance of raw nutrition for cats, but for newborn infants, and to fertilize plants, and to fertilize the meat and the foods that we eat. So, general summary of everything. Most of the cats who died on the deficient cooked meat diets, they died of infections in their kidneys, infections in their lungs, and bones. So do any of these problems sound familiar in modern day cat diseases, kidneys and lungs? This unique study is often quoted and more often misquoted. In fact, I feel like I remember hearing about Pottenger's cats in vet school. And I think I remember that, I'm pretty sure I remember that. But it was taught, turned around backwards and out of context and like on purpose misrepresented. What Pottenger found was that when you cook food, it destroys a lot of the nutrients to where the cats are not healthy because they don't get all the nutrients they need. But modern industrial food supply, and what they mention about this book in vet school, is this is the reason why you need big kibble and modern dry food, that they put all these additives in to make up for the loss of vitamins and minerals and nutrients. Well, if you just didn't cook the food in the first place and you sourced it from a clean, healthy place, you wouldn't need to add anything to it. It's the cooking of the kibble that makes it deficient. It's why they have to add all those things to it. So it's just taught completely out of context and, you know, completely backwards. Dr. Pottenger made a few general notes of his observations, and that's just what I want to talk about in this video to kind of keep it short. So he said the healthy cats had a broad face with adequate nasal passages, and they had a broad dental arch. So my dental arch, my teeth, dental arch, is relatively narrow, and it's relatively common of a lot of Western, modern food eating individuals. You look at a lot of people from like Switzerland or Iceland or the Nordic countries where everybody's super healthy, when they smile, they have a wide set of teeth. They don't have their wisdom teeth hanging out. They've got a lot of teeth and a wider smile, a wider dental arch. Well, that's what he saw in these cats. They had very little shedding of their fur, very little, or no, gum inflammation was seldom seen, is how he puts it. So gum inflammation, how often do we see that in today's cats? Every cat has gum inflammation. They were resistant to infections, fleas, various other parasites, and they had no signs of allergies. When dropped from a height of 6 feet in various positions, upside down or whatever, they always landed on their feet and they immediately came running back for more play. All right? So the cats that he fed cooked meat, they still got raw milk and cod liver oil. The only difference was that their meat and organs were cooked. So anyone could see that they were not as robust. You know, non-medical professionals could look at these two groups of cats and see that they were different. That's what he wrote in his book. Each kitten of the litter would be a different size. They weren't just a uniform size like with the raw-fed cats. They developed longer but thinner bones, okay? So their leg bones would be longer than they should be, which changes the geometry of the ligaments, and they end up breaking off their femoral head, or they tear out their ACL. We see that a lot today. And their bones were thinner too, so they break a lot easier. There's long, brittle bones. And they were also deficient in thyroid hormones, causing a lot of illness. Now, today's cats tend to have hyperthyroid, too much thyroid hormone. But that comes from all the thyroid additives in the food, and there's chemicals in the lining of the cans of food that cause thyroid tumors. So deficient thyroids don't apply to today's modern cats because of all the things in our modern environment that cause hyperthyroid. But deficient thyroid can easily be extrapolated to people and dogs. People and dogs have deficient thyroids. So just the fact that we eat cooked food instead of raw food, or the sourcing of our food, we'll get into that later, maybe another video, would explain why we have thyroid deficiencies. So he also found the female cats were more irritable and even dangerous to handle. In particular, 3 of them had the names of tiger, cobra, and rattlesnake because they would just lash out and bite people for no reason. The males, on the other hand, were too docile. They didn't defend their herd or whatever. So he also said vermin, which is rodents, and parasites abound in the cooked food group. They all have skin lesions and their allergies, and they get worse with each generation as they reproduce. And many of them die of diarrhea and upper respiratory disease, pneumonia. The deficient group, the cooked food deficient group, never survived for more than 3 generations. The kids would keep dying, and they wouldn't reproduce well. And after 3 generations, there was nothing left. So he's described the raw-fed group, the cooked food group. Then he described a third group, interestingly, which is the regenerating cats. So he took these 1st or 2nd generation cooked food cats who are unhealthy and started giving them raw food to try to recover their health. It took them 4 generations to get back to pretty normal and healthy, but they never ever recovered to the full health and vibrance of the raw-fed cats. And that's a problem that we as holistic vets and holistic pet owners face in today's world. We can never get them back to as good as they should have been if we had started feeding them the right food when they were born, and if their moms were fed the right nutrition when the kittens or the puppies were in the womb. We can get them back to really, really healthy, but we're never going to get them back to as good as they would have been if we had fed them raw food from the start. So we need to be feeding the right foods from the start. And that applies to people, okay? So all of this stuff we've talked about was only the difference between the raw and the cooked meat. He goes on next to make the other variable the milk. Instead of raw milk, he does pasteurized milk or condensed milk. Again, everything, all the cats on the cooked or pasteurized milk had deficiencies and were sick, and everything was bad with them too. The respiratory disease. Does that sound familiar to any shelter vets out there or shelter people? All the cats have upper respiratory disease. And when they use the condensed sweetened milk, so I remember the canned condensed sweetened milk. My grandmother used it for cooking a lot. I don't buy that. I don't know if that's still in the stores. But the condensed sweetened milk made all the cats fat, gave them even more skeletal deficiencies like the long brittle bones, and made them even more irritable, and they would just have agitated, endless pacing back and forth in their cage. So next video, we'll talk about the difference in the milk he gave. So raw milk from cows raised naturally on grass versus the raw milk from cows fed grains and industrial food waste, which is the same as today's factory farming. So we'll do that next. Thank you.